welcome you watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you. Lots coming up on the next 1 hour. The top stories from the globe. We are starting with the United States. Well, the United States is in the grip of an enormous storm, one that has knocked out power to more than 1 million homes and businesses. The massive storm system unleashed vicious winds and thunderstorms across the East Coast on Monday, from Pennsylvania down to Georgia, leaving at least 2 dead. In the northwestern Alabama city of Florence, a 28-year-old man died after lightning struck him in a parking lot, a rarity in the U.S., as only about 20 people on an average are killed by lightning strikes annually, according to the National Weather Service. The storm system brought heavy rain, thunder and violent winds of up to 70 miles per hour in parts of the coast from New York to Mississippi and caused major travel disruptions in the skies. Images show homes in Tennessee with their roofs torn to shreds and debris strewn about on neighborhood lawns. By Monday night, more than 2,600 U.S. flights had been cancelled and nearly 7,900 delayed. Many cancellations were at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, which was hit by disruptions caused by the storms. The hardest hit airports included the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, as we mentioned, New York's LaGuardia Airport and the Reagan National Airport near Washington, D.C. Hundreds of thousands of Americans were without power, with the majority of outages recorded on Monday night in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Georgia and Maryland. By early evening, more than 1.1 million people were without power. The Knoxville Utilities Board tweeted that the damage across its service area in Tennessee was widespread and extensive and will likely take several days to repair. In Georgia, crews were out as soon as the skies cleared and began working to restore power after uprooted trees and powerful winds, hail and rain downed power lines. Trees and power lines were toppled in multiple states, falling into roads and even some homes. A row of utility poles was toppled in Westminster, Maryland. A risk of severe thunderstorms, a level of 2 or 5, exists on Tuesday as well for parts of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Colorado, Nebraska and Kansas. That is more than 5 million additional people being at risk for damaging winds and heavy rainfall. The White House, in fact, pushed up by 19 minutes President Joe Biden's departure on a 4-day trip to Arizona, New Mexico and Utah. The White House also cancelled a back-to-school cybersecurity event that was to feature First Lady Jill Biden. The Office of Personnel Management announced that all non-emergency employees would have to depart before 3 p.m. when all federal offices closed. People were advised, have yourself in a strong shelter, be at home or be at work. All right, to get a sense of the kind of impact this storm has had and what the United States, or at least parts of it, are still dealing with, let's now go across to Ramakrishnan Sridharan, consulting editor with News9, who joins us live from Washington, D.C. Shri, welcome to Global Lens. Great to have you back on the show. Now, it looks like the situation has been rather grim in terms of the power outages, the number of people who've been impacted. What can you tell us about the current situation? Because it looks like the threat hasn't subsided yet. One storm, it seems, is following another one.
That's right, Neha. So if you look at what's happening across the United States, it's a story of contrast. You have states like Arizona and Texas, which are dealing with record heat wave. And there are people dying of heat wave in these states. And on the other hand, we have this severe storm system which are forming along the Atlantic coast and the coast of Mexico. And those are like causing other kind of challenges in terms of heavy rainfall and then the consequent uprooting of trees and damages to power lines and homes and people. You mentioned 2 people who lost their lives. One was from lightning strike, and the other gentleman died when a tree fell on him. So the US really is looking at what I would, and a lot of experts are saying, is basically a fallout of the climate change. So what's really happening is that with warmer weather, the storm systems are intensifying. There is more moisture in the atmosphere. Therefore, the rainfalls are becoming heavier. And as the rainfalls intensify, we have flash floods happening because the drainage systems here are not equipped to deal with a ton of water dropping just over a couple of hours, or let's say even half an hour sometimes. So what the US is witnessing, Neha, is really a fallout of climate change. And for all those people who have been denying that there is climate change or global warming happening, this is a great wake-up call. And there is a lot of soul searching that's happening within the US right now, given the cancellations, given the normal life, how it has been thrown out of gear. So a lot of soul searching is happening within the people and also at the administrative level in the US, Neha.
Well, you put it quite interestingly, Shri. There is no doubt that climate change is wreaking havoc across the globe, and we're discussing the story of these storms in the United States on a day when it's been declared that July was the hottest month ever on record in all of human history. So if anybody is still in denial about climate change, well, all that we can say to them is wake up and smell the coffee. Thanks for that update, Shri. We're coming back to you in just a moment to discuss the next story with you. Let's now turn our attention to the Russia-Ukraine war. Was there yet another assassination plot targeting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky? Ukraine's security service claims to have foiled a plot to assassinate Zelensky after the arrest of a woman suspected of gathering intelligence about his movements. The security service of Ukraine, known as the SBU, says the unnamed woman was gathering information about Zelensky's visit to the southern Mykolaiv region, where Russia was planning to unleash a major air assault. A spokesperson for Ukraine's armed forces said the SBU was able to foil the attack on the president during a recent trip to Mykolaiv, describing it as an aborted assassination attempt. The woman had tried to figure out the timings and the route for Zelensky's visit, but the SBU learned about her efforts in advance and put extra security measures in place during that trip. On his Telegram channel, Zelensky said the head of the SBU had updated him on the fight against traitors, as he put it. A drone attack on Moscow earlier this year, attributed to Ukraine's military, had been described by the Russians as an attempt to assassinate Vladimir Putin, for which Moscow had said there would be reprisals. Now, at the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, Zelensky had stated he was aware that Putin wanted him dead. More than 400 Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group were reported to have been in Kiev in February 2022 with orders to kill Zelensky as part of a decapitation strategy. In fact, Kiev claimed in March last year that Zelensky had survived 3 assassination attempts in a single week and that there had been dozens more. A blurred image of the suspect being detained by masked officers in a kitchen was published by the SBU along with phone messages and handwritten notes. The woman was allegedly seeking information about the location of electronic warfare systems and warehouses with ammunition. The SBU published screenshots of text messages consistent with an exchange between an informant and handler, but with few specifics. Kiev says the woman was turned collaborator by FSB agents and continued to work for them. The FSB is Russia's main security and spy agency. The SBU said its officers kept monitoring the suspect to get more information on her Russian handlers and assignments. Officers then caught her red-handed, we are told, as she attempted to pass intelligence data to Russian secret services. The woman allegedly photographed locations and tried to get information from her personal contacts. If convicted, she could serve up to 12 years in prison. As we said, Zelensky has faced several known attempts on his life since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of the country in February last year. Russian special forces were tasked with eliminating the Ukrainian president right at the start of the war. In a profile published in April 2022, Time magazine described how Russian troops had parachuted into Kiev to kill or capture Zelensky and his family on the 24th of February, the day after the war began. As Ukrainian forces fought Russians on the streets of Kiev, the Presidential Guard tried to seal the compound using police barricades and piles of plywood. Rifles and bulletproof vests were handed out to Zelensky and a dozen of his close aides as Russian troops made 2 attempts to storm the presidential compound. That's what Kiev had reported. Zelensky ignored his bodyguards' advice to flee the compound and even refused the offers of British and American forces to evacuate him. He responded with the famous line, "I need ammo, not a ride." Meanwhile, there has been another major Russian strike on Ukraine. At least 8 people were killed and dozens of others injured in a Russian double-tap strike on a residential building in Ukraine's eastern city of Pokrovsk. 2 missiles hit the town. The second as rescuers were searching for victims of the first. Dozens of people were injured, including police officers and rescuers. 2 children were among more than 30 civilians who were hurt. Pokrovsk lies about 70 kilometers northwest of the Donetsk city, which is occupied by Russian forces. High-rise buildings, private houses, administrative buildings, catering establishments and a hotel were destroyed in these strikes. Zelensky published a video of a 5-story building that had its floor destroyed. Amid scenes of chaos and confusion, the video showed civilians clearing away rubble and rescuing people and helping them into ambulances. All right, let's go back to Shri at this point. But before that, let's listen in to what Zelensky said about this latest, quote-unquote, aborted assassination attempt.
A rescue operation is underway in Pokrovsk and Donetsk. After Russian missile strikes, Iskander missiles against ordinary residential buildings, all our services are working on the spot. Unfortunately, there are victims. There are wounded. There are dead. My condolences to the families and friends. The second missile strike, unfortunately, resulted in the death of a member of the State Emergency Service.
All right, let me go back to Shri, who is live with us from Washington, D.C. He is closely tracking these developments for us. Shri, as I mentioned in the middle of the story that, here's a man who had famously told the Americans when they had offered him a safe passage out of Kiev at the start of this war, "I need ammo, not a ride." Now, it is no secret that there have been multiple attempts on the life of the Ukrainian president, some widely publicized, others perhaps not very well known. This is something he's talked about repeatedly in his multiple video addresses and also in that interview to Time magazine. What more can you share with us about this latest incident, which is being described by Kiev as yet another aborted assassination attempt? Apparently this woman, they say, was a Russian informant and was caught red-handed, according to the authorities in Ukraine.
Right, Neha. So let me start off by saying that obviously, both the countries are in the middle of a war, and this is an allegation which has been made by Kiev, stating that this was an assassination attempt of their president. But there's a war, as I said, and all's fair in love and war. So this is probably the 12th or 13th assassination attempt, according to, Kiev, that has been mounted on Zelensky. Now, how much out of it is actually real, or how much of it is just sympathetic propaganda? That's hard to know. But I think it's safe to assume that in a war, attempts would be made on the key person's life. For example, in this case, Zelensky, of course, because Russia has been fighting this war for 1.5 years now. I mean, what they expected to be a quick war has dragged on for more than 18 months now, literally. Excuse me. So there has to be a way for Russia to find a quick end to this war. And I think from their perspective, from their war strategist, the easiest thing would be to eliminate a man who has managed to marshal a whole lot of support from Western countries, and to the extent that when Russia expected that Ukraine would run out of ammunition within, let's say, a few months, they've been reinforced, rearmed by Western allies, and the war has gone on. And it's Russia actually today which seems to be the one that's looking fatigued. Its soldiers definitely are looking fatigued, and it's probably running out of ammunition as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if any attempt was made on Zelensky's life. But let's not forget that even Moscow has alleged that multiple attempts have been made on the life of their president, Vladimir Putin. In fact, they have said that about 6 times, starting as far back as 2002, attempts have been made on Putin's life, including the latest one in May, when there was a drone attack on the Kremlin. So, Neha, this is like both the sides trying and fighting their wars in whatever way they think fit. But for anyone to independently verify or confirm is very hard. Maybe the intelligence sources would have, more information on this. But from media's perspective, we have to go with what these states are telling us, whether it is a Kiev side of the story or the Moscow side of the story.
Well, yes, absolutely. We know that these things happen during a war. In fact, just earlier this year, Shri, as you mentioned, the Kremlin had claimed that there was a drone strike carried out by Ukraine directly on the Kremlin or near Kremlin, and that the target was Vladimir Putin. But, looking at how the war is currently poised, it's very interesting what Zelensky said just a few days ago, and we discussed it here on this show, The Global Lens. Following a series of drone strikes in Moscow in the very recent past, Zelensky said, without actually directly claiming responsibility for those drone strikes, he said, the war is coming back to Russia. Now, some dismissed it as bravado. Others said, well, here's a man who has ensured that a war that Putin had hoped would end in 2 weeks has now gone on for well over 17 months. How do you see those statements that have been made by Zelensky in the recent past?
Well, Zelensky is a far more confident man ever since the Western countries rallied around to support a small country like Ukraine. And it's their drones which are actually helping Ukraine get back at Russia and carry on assault within Russian territories. So Zelensky's hands have been strengthened to a very large extent by Western allies. Otherwise, Ukraine on its own would not have been able to sustain this war for so long, Neha. This story would have been long over.
Well, that certainly is true. There is no doubt that Zelensky, has been getting immense support from NATO countries, though of course membership of NATO continues to be a sore point for Zelensky. We've seen him getting even angry about it recently at the NATO summit. But how much long will this war really go on for is anybody's guess. It is now in its 18th month. Shri, thank you for those updates. We'll come back to you in just a moment. Let's now get you our next story on Global Lens. The World Health Organization has flagged a batch of contaminated common cold syrup manufactured by an Indian company, the latest in a series of warnings by the agency about what have been described as substandard medicines coming in from India. The WHO said the batch of the syrup, branded Cold Out, found in Iraq, was manufactured by Forts India Laboratories for Dabilai Pharma and had higher than acceptable limit of contaminants, diethylene and ethylene glycol. The WHO added that the manufacturer and the marketer did not provide any guarantees on the safety and quality of the product. The syrup, Cold Out, used to treat symptoms of the common cold and allergy. The WHO says that this particular product product may have been distributed through informal markets to other countries as well. According to the World Health Organization, diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol are toxic to humans when consumed and can prove to be fatal. The substandard batch of the product referenced in this alert is said to be unsafe, and its use, especially in children, may result in serious injury or death. That's what the agency has said. And the toxic effects can include abdominal pain, vomiting, diarrhea, inability to pass urine, headache, altered mental state, and acute kidney injury that could in fact lead to death. Advising regulatory authorities and the public against using this product, or at least the affected batch, the WHO has said if you or someone you know has or may have used the affected product or suffered an adverse reaction or unexpected side effects after use, you're advised to seek immediate medical advice from a healthcare professional. The WHO has now requested increased surveillance and diligence within the supply chains of countries and regions that are likely to have been impacted by these products. National regulatory authorities have been advised to immediately notify the WHO if these substandard products are discovered in their respective countries. But this isn't the first time that a cough syrup manufactured in India has been deemed unsafe. Cough syrups made in India were linked to deaths of at least 89 children in Gambia and Uzbekistan last year. Indian authorities also found violations at Riemann Labs, whose cough syrups were linked to deaths of children in Cameroon. The Indian regulator had then cancelled the manufacturing license of Marion Biotech, which had exported the syrups to Uzbekistan, and arrested some of their employees. The company involved in Gambia, Maiden Pharmaceuticals, has denied that its drugs were responsible for the deaths in those countries, and tests by an Indian government laboratory found no toxins in them. In September last year, the World Health Organization said 4 products of Maiden Pharmaceuticals Limited in Haryana and Himachal Pradesh were under scrutiny. In December last year, the WHO raised an alert about 2 products of Biotech Private Limited in Uttar Pradesh. This year, in April, a cough syrup manufactured by QP Pharmaceuticals in Punjab was flagged by the World Health Agency. Meanwhile, India's Central Drug Standard Control Organization, along with state licensing authorities, has conducted risk-based inspections of 162 pharma firms and issued show-cause notices in 143 cases. That is what Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia told Parliament just today. He said stop production order has been issued in 40 cases, cancellation and suspension of product licenses in 66 cases, issuance of warning letters in 21 cases, and in 1 case an FIR has been registered and 3 people have been arrested as per the provisions of the Drugs Rules 1945. The minister also said that the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, the Department of Commerce and the Ministry of Commerce and Industry issued a notification on the 22nd of May this year for amendments in export policy of cough syrups, making it compulsory for cough syrup manufacturers to get a certificate of analysis from a government-approved laboratory before exporting their products, with effect from the 1st of June. Accordingly, more than 900 such cough syrup samples have been analyzed and certificate of analysis released. Manufacturers are required to comply with the conditions of license granted under this Act to manufacture any drugs for sale and distribution in the country. The health minister made that clear in a statement to Parliament. He said when cases concerning quality or safety of drugs are reported, the matter is taken up with the state licensing authority in order to take necessary action, and these state authorities are legally empowered to take action against violation of any conditions of the licensing, including prosecution. Okay, let's go back to Shri at this point. Shri, the government of India, by way of that statement that's been made by the health minister today and the data released by him, is sending out the message that we take this matter seriously and punitive action is being taken and will be taken against anybody who violates any section of this particular law. But fact of the matter is that, as we said, such instances of cough syrups made in India being flagged by the WHO as being unsafe, even potentially fatal, are, occurring at a rather alarming frequency. This should be a cause for concern for the Indian government, as it indeed is for the governments of those countries where these affected samples have been found.
That's right, Neha. And since we are talking about pharmaceuticals and lives of people, to my mind, even one case is one too many. But before I talk more about this, let me tell our viewers the genesis of this particular case, the cold medicine. So this was basically an investigation done by news agency Bloomberg, which picked up samples of Indian-made syrups, cough syrups in particular, and they got them tested in a lab in the US. So out of all these more than 100 samples, I think, which they collected, this one came out as one with a limit higher than the allowed, permissible limit of the chemicals that you talked about, diethyl and ethylene, chemicals in the cough syrup. So these were flagged off, and then it was sent to the Iraq Ministry of Health and also to the WHO. Although the government of Iraq has not received any report, they say, of any adverse reaction to the cough syrup, but since the product does look compromised, I think they have decided to act out of caution. And also, given the prior precedents, especially Uzbekistan and Gambia that you mentioned, where deaths happen because of improper cough syrup composition. So, what the government of India done is absolutely the right thing. You cannot allow any errant manufacturer to tarnish the name of the entire Indian pharmaceutical industry. To my mind, the Indian pharmaceutical industry is our poster boy as much as the IT industry is. We have had companies like Cipla, Dr. Reddy's, Ranbaxy come out with major life-saving drugs which have saved lives around the world. In fact, 40% of American generics medicines, generics are basically copies of patented drugs and therefore cheaper for people to buy. These are sourced from India. So 40% of US generics comes from India. So now that would not happen if you didn't have great companies making all these, wonderful drugs which are saving lives of people. So therefore, what the government has done is absolutely the right thing. They have to quickly move, crack down on companies which are violating manufacturing norms, the GMP as we call it in the industry, good manufacturing practices, and shut them down as quickly as possible, so that the larger companies which are exporting billions dollars worth of drugs to not just US but around the world, they are not affected by such instances, Neha. So I don't think we should measure the capability or the performance of the Indian pharmaceutical industry based on what has happened either in Gambia, Uzbekistan, or Iraq.
You're quite right, Sri. India is known as the pharmacy of the world. Our pharmaceutical industry certainly is a source of immense pride. They manufacture and export drugs all over the world, including to the United States. Not only that, let's not forget about the great vaccine diplomacy that India was lauded for at the height of the COVID pandemic, when we exported life-saving COVID vaccines to so many different parts of the world. So you're quite right that we have a strong reputation to defend here, and after all, lives are at stake. And therefore, we cannot allow a few rotten apples to tarnish the image of otherwise, the fabulous work that India's pharma companies have been doing for a very long time now. Well, on that note, Sri, thank you so much once again for joining us and sharing with us your perspective on those big stories of the day. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Neha. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Sri. See you again tomorrow. All right, on that note, let's slip into a quick break here, but don't go anywhere. There's more on the other side.
मैं इमरान अहमद खान नियाजी सबके दिल से हल्फ उठाता हूँ.
When Imran Khan came initially into politics, he thought his personal popularity would be sufficient for him It didn't happen.